I smoothed out the creases in my navy blue dress, erasing the unseen folds. It was the sort of outfit I always believed suitable for family gatherings, neither too formal to avoid making Melissa roll her eyes, nor too casual to appear untidy. At 77, I had long abandoned fashion trends, yet I still preferred to present myself neatly. Gary mentioned that dinner would commence at 7 o'clock, so I still had an hour to spare. I glanced around my living room, where every object seemed to tell its own tale. A photograph of James and me on our golden wedding anniversary. Young Gary, holding his fishing rod with the first fish he ever caught. Toby and Rebecca at their graduation ceremonies. These images stood silently, as reminders of a time when life felt less complicated. My eyes lingered on James's portrait. What would he advise now? 15 years had passed since his departure, but I still sought his counsel in my mind. Edith would caution, "Do not let yourself get hurt." James always knew how to establish limits, even with his own son, whereas I often struggled with this. The phone buzzed on the table, a message from Gary. Smiling, I reached for my glasses, hoping for clarity about tonight. Perhaps he wanted to check if I needed assistance getting to their new home, though recently, such offers had been rare. "Mom, I am sorry, but we cannot make it tonight. Melissa is hosting a dinner for her colleagues. We will reschedule for another day," the text read. I read it again. Something felt off. Gary had called just yesterday, insisting that I attend, mentioning a special announcement. I stared in confusion. I stared at the message once more when my phone buzzed with a fresh notification. "You are not invited to dinner. My wife does not want you there." My hand shook and my heart tightened, as though icy fingers were tightening their grip. It could not be from Gary, not from my son, yet it was his name and number. I sank slowly into the chair, still holding the phone tightly, as if releasing it would sever my last connection to reality. Scenes from the past flashed before me. Young Gary clinging to my skirt on his first day at kindergarten. Teenage Gary shyly seeking advice about girls. Adult Gary proudly introducing Melissa to me, beaming with joy. And now this message. Cold, distant, alienating. Was it a sudden choice, or merely the moment they chose to be honest? How often had they talked about me in secret? How many smiles had been false? How many invitations had been compelled? My eyes landed on a brochure on the table, a glossy flyer for the River Ridge Estates apartment complex, their new residence, a 3-story townhouse with a river view and its own private dock. The house for which I had paid a down payment of $120,000 6 months ago. "Mom, it's an investment for the future," Gary had said then. "A place for family gatherings. Your corner will be too." My corner. I smiled bitterly. Obviously, that corner had vanished. I recalled the day Gary and I had been at the bank. The manager glanced at me with barely hidden astonishment as I completed the paperwork and asked, "Are you certain, Mrs. Wilson? That is quite a large amount." I was confident that James had left me enough to assist our son. It felt like the right decision to make. There were other expenses afterward, including a new vehicle for Gary, safer for trips with the children, and a private education for Toby, whose learning needs required extra care. Melissa had dreamed of renovating the kitchen. She works tirelessly and truly deserves comfort. Every time I took out my checkbook, it felt justified. But what did I receive in return? Infrequent phone calls, formal holiday visits, and now this message. I stood up slowly and walked towards the secretary's desk. From the top right drawer, a gift from my mother, I retrieved all my financial papers, organized folders with receipts, bank statements, and checks. The folder titled Gary was the bulkiest. I opened it and began sorting through the documents. A check for $20,000 to launch a business Gary had given up on after half a year. A receipt for continued education classes for Melissa. A bill for roof repairs on their previous residence. And insurance payments for Toby's car. How many expenses had I covered over the years? How many times had I helped, supported, and rescued them? only to be locked out from the doorstep of a home I had paid for. My phone buzzed again. I flinched, but saw it was a text from someone else. Rebecca, my granddaughter. She wrote, "Grandma, are you coming over today? I missed you." My hand lingered over the device. Rebecca had always stood out as genuine and compassionate. Even when her parents and brother seemed to have forgotten I existed, she would make the effort to stop by, call, and check on how I was doing. I typed slowly, "Honey, it appears your parents have decided it is best for me to remain at home." Moments later, a reply came through. "What? Why? Daddy told me yesterday that you absolutely had to be there." I pictured Rebecca now, somewhere inside that new Wilson house, clearly confused. The home I had paid for. My eyes returned to the file folder. For years, I believed I was purchasing my family's love and admiration. But in reality, I was merely leasing their time and attention. And it seemed that lease had run out. I grabbed my cell phone and dialed my bank's number. After several rings, a courteous female voice answered. "Good evening, Fayetteville Community Bank. How may I assist you?" "Good evening. My name is Edith Wilson. I would like to inquire about some recurring payments from my account." "Certainly, Mrs. Wilson. I will need to ask a few questions to verify your identity." As she recited her inquiries, and I responded patiently, a clear, determined, and fair plan began to take shape in my mind. "Thank you for the confirmation, Mrs. Wilson. What exactly can I assist you with today?" "I want to cancel all automatic payments and transfers from every one of my accounts." There was a short pause. "All payments, Mrs. Wilson? You have quite a number." "Yes, all of them. And I also need to I decided to cancel the power of attorney I had given to my son Gary Wilson. I could hear a slight hesitation in her voice, as she said this was a significant decision. "Mrs. Wilson, maybe it would be better if you came down to the bank branch so we can discuss the details more thoroughly." I replied that I would come tomorrow morning to sign the necessary paperwork, but I needed to start the process today. "Is there any way to begin immediately?" After a brief pause, she said, "Yes. We can temporarily halt all payments until you visit, but for a complete revocation, your signature is required." That was great news. Suspend everything right away. While she typed on her computer, I glanced at James's photograph. "You were right, my dear," I thought. "You cannot allow people to take advantage of you even if they are your own children." "Mrs. Wilson, the temporary suspension is now in effect. You have a total of 174 regular payments and transfers, all blocked until you come to the branch." 174. I was stunned to realize that I had so many. 174 ways I had been supporting my son and his family. "Thank you," I told her. "I will arrive right when the branch opens tomorrow." I hung up the phone and felt an unusual sense of relief. It was as though the heavy burden I had been carrying for years was suddenly lifted from my shoulders. The phone buzzed again. It was Gary. Rebecca probably had told him something. I didn't bother answering. Instead, I wrote a brief message, "Then pay your own way, freeloaders." My finger hovered over the send button. Was I truly prepared to close this chapter and break free? A delicate bond I had upheld for so many years through both money and patience. Yet were they not the ones who shattered it first by refusing even the simplest respect, had they not decided I was no longer necessary, even in the home I had paid for? I pressed send and then switched off the phone. In the stillness of my living room, a surprising peace washed over me. For the first time in ages, I had acted not for my son or his family, but for myself, and it felt freeing. I moved toward the closet and retrieved an old photo album. As I turned the pages of my past, my wedding to James Gary's birth family holidays and trips, I saw that somewhere along the line, I had lost my identity, blending into the needs of others, overlooking my own wishes and self-respect. James always said, "Edith, do not let anyone undervalue you." Even on his deathbed, he urged me to care for myself, just as I cared for others. But I had failed to keep that promise until now. I shut the album and returned it to its place. Then I removed the dress intended for dinner and changed into my home attire. I brewed some tea and fetched a book I had long wanted to read, but always postponed due to endless demands and commitments toward my family. Tomorrow would bring a fresh start, a moment to begin a new chapter, free from the financial chains tying me to people who neither appreciate my help nor esteem me. 174 receipts, 174 reasons to move forward. I took a sip of tea. I poured myself a cup of tea and opened the book, relishing the quiet and the luxury of having no obligations. My phone remained switched off, and for the first time in what felt like ages, my heart was calm and steady. The Wilson Community Bank opened at 9 o'clock in the morning, but I arrived 20 minutes early. The night had been surprisingly tranquil. It was the first time in a long while that I had slept without needing any sleeping pills. A strong sense of determination fueled me as the bank doors finally opened. I was their first visitor. The young woman behind the counter welcomed me with a warm smile. "Good morning, how can I assist you?" she asked. I said I needed to speak with Mrs. Howard. Minutes later, I found myself seated in Linda Howard's office. She looked much the same as she always did, her gray hair neatly styled and her sharp eyes peering over thin-rimmed glasses. "Edith, it's a pleasure to see you," she greeted me and shook my hand. "I was informed about your call yesterday. All 174 payments have been put on hold as you requested. Is there an issue?" I met her gaze directly and replied that I wanted to cancel every single payment permanently and revoke Gary's access to my accounts. Linda removed her glasses and wiped them with a tissue, a habit I recognized whenever she was deep in thought. "Edith, we have known each other for many years. Are you certain about this? It's quite a drastic move." I responded without hesitation. "I am completely certain." "Now." She nodded and began typing something on her computer. "The computer is functioning well. I will prepare all the necessary paperwork, but it will take some time because you have numerous automatic payments." While the system was compiling the documents, Linda pulled out a thick folder and said, "Here are printouts of all your regular transactions for the past year. It might be useful for you to review them, so nothing is overlooked." I opened the folder to find pages upon pages of statements, each line representing money flowing from my pocket into my family's. The first receipt was for the monthly mortgage payment on Gary and Melissa's new house, $3,800. I recalled the day Gary brought me to see it and said, "Mom, this is the ideal home for our family and you. There's a guest room with a private bathroom on the first floor, so you won't have to climb stairs. A guest room I never slept in, and now they won't let me use." The next receipt covered the insurance on Melissa's car, a premium SUV she claimed was essential for dealing with high-level clients, costing $850 every 3 months. I continued through the folder, finding a payment for a country club membership where Melissa was networking, bills for a private dental clinic because Toby, the usual name, needed a specialist for a unique bite, and Rebecca's, the multi-layered name, college tuition, the one payment I never resented. And each receipt brought back memories of conversations, requests, and sometimes tears. "Mom, we are really tight on money right now, grandmother. This is the newest model. Without it, I will stand out like a sore thumb, Edith." Stylized. "You certainly do not want your grandson to develop insecurities, right?" Receipt after receipt, page after page, I sifted through the documentation, a journey through my own innocence and their avarice. "Here is the paperwork to put an end to all payments." Melissa's voice brought me back to the present, along with the power of attorney revocation form. "Please review it thoroughly and sign if you concur." Without hesitation, I took the pen and signed. Edith, in a softer tone, added, "If you require any assistance or guidance, it's perfectly fine." "Melissa," I smiled for the first time in what felt like an age. Everything truly was all right. Leaving the bank, I felt as if a heavy, unseen burden that had weighed me down for years was finally lifted. My next destination was my lawyer's office. Francis Whitaker had been serving our family since James was alive. His beard had grayed and grown longer. His spectacles had thickened, yet that crafty spark in his eyes remained unchanged. Mrs. Wilson, what a delightful surprise, he said, gesturing toward my seat. What can I do for you? I responded, composed and sure. I want to revise my will and establish a lifelong trust to safeguard my assets. Francis arched an eyebrow and asked what brought about this change. Family circumstances have shifted, I replied, deciding not to elaborate. I need to understand how to manage my finances legally and securely without interference from my son or his relatives. He nodded silently, refraining from further inquiries. There are various options. Let us review them. We spent the following hour discussing irrevocable trusts and financial power. Concerning the power of attorney and conditional clauses in a will, Gary took notes and clarified the complex legal details. I felt unusually free to make these decisions. When we finished, my phone had 15 missed calls from Gary, 7 from Melissa, and 3 from Toby. None from Rebecca. Francis asked as he walked me to the door, should I have the documents ready by the end of the week? I replied, the sooner the better. Francis thanked me and nodded with understanding. You know, Edith, James always said you were tougher than you appeared. I'm glad to see he was right. I left the office with a faint smile. James always saw straight through me. On my way home, I stopped by the supermarket for the first time in quite a while. I bought groceries just for myself, not considering Gary's tastes or Toby's preferred treats. It was an odd yet refreshing feeling to think solely about my own wishes. At home, there was a surprise waiting. Rebecca sat on the porch with her arms wrapped around her knees. When she spotted my car, she jumped up excitedly. "Grandma!" she exclaimed, rushing over to help with the bags. "I've been calling all day. Why didn't you answer?" I looked closely at my granddaughter. Rebecca bears a striking resemblance to me in my youth. The same brown hair, the same stubborn furrows between her brows whenever she worries. "I've had a busy day, dear," I said, opening the door. "Come inside and tell me everything that happened." We entered the kitchen where Rebecca sat at the table, nervously drumming her fingers on the countertop while I organized the groceries. "Grandma, what is happening? Dad is panicking. He says you have blocked all the payments and are not answering your phone." Calmly, I took out the kettle. "It is true. I decided to stop providing financial support to your family. But why?" I could hear the genuine confusion in her voice. "Did something occur?" I poured water into the kettle and placed it on the stove before responding. "Your father canceled my invitation to the family dinner last night. He said your mother did not want me there." Rebecca went pale. "No way. Dad had been insisting all week how crucial it was for you to attend. I have a message." I pulled out my phone and showed her. Rebecca covered her mouth as she read. "Oh my God, I had no idea, I swear." Her eyes filled with tears. "This is terrible, Grandma. I don't understand how he could do this." I put a cup of tea in front of her. That was the breaking point. "For years, I have paid for everything from your house to Toby's tennis lessons and other expenses. During all that time, I felt like I was being taken advantage of. Yesterday, I got proof." Rebecca was silent, staring into her cup. Then she looked up at me. "You know, I have always seen it, that they take advantage of your generosity, especially Mom. I tried talking to Dad, but he always defended her." I nodded. Deep down, I always knew. Rebecca understood more than she let on. "What will happen now?" she asked softly. "They have so much to lose. Making payments to take out loans that they will have to handle by themselves," I said with a shrug. "They are grown-ups with stable careers. Gary is a building inspector, and your mother is a thriving realtor. They will manage just fine." The phone on the desk rang again, but Gary and I ignored it. Rebecca asked, "Aren't you going to pick it up?" I shook my head. "Not today." I needed space to gather my thoughts, while he needed time to grasp the weight of his words. Rebecca looked at me with a thoughtful expression. "You know, Grandma, I have never seen you so resolute." I gave a faint smile. It had been a long time since I saw myself that way. We finished our tea in peaceful quiet. As Rebecca was leaving, she held me tighter than normal. "Are you all right? Sure you do not want me to stay?" I gently stroked her cheek. "I am perfectly fine, dear. Go ahead, and do not worry about me." She nodded, but hesitated before leaving. I am not picking sides in this matter. Grandma, you understand that, right? Of course, they smiled. This is between your parents and me. It does not involve you. After Rebecca left, the house grew quiet once again. I checked the mail and found a notice about a declined charge on Toby's credit card. It seemed my grandson had reached his credit limit quickly. I put the letter aside and settled into the chair by the window. My phone kept buzzing with new messages and calls, but I ignored them all. Instead, I took out an old photo album and flipped to a random page, a photograph from 2 decades ago. James, young Gary, Melissa, little Toby, and Rebecca were all together on a picnic. Everyone wore smiles. But when did things shift? When did support turn into a requirement? When did love become a demand for financial help? I closed the album and walked to the hallway mirror. The woman staring back looked tired, yet her eyes held a new resolve I had not witnessed in years. It was time to remember who I truly was. Edith Wilson, I told my reflection. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, breaking my thoughts. My heart leapt. Could it be Gary? I went to the door and looked through the peephole. Standing there was Laureen Campbell, an old friend holding a basket. Edith, she said as I opened the door, and she embraced me tightly. I called, but you didn't answer. I thought I'd stop by to see if you were all right. Come in, Laureen, I replied, letting her inside. Sorry, I switched off my phone because of a small family emergency. She placed the basket on the table, filled with homemade cookies and a jar of jam. She looked at me carefully and said, "Family troubles, I guess. Melissa again?" Laureen had never been quiet about her views of my sister-in-law, whom she called a predator. Gary was present this time. I briefly explained the message I received yesterday and my choice. Laureen listened without saying a word. When I finished, she grasped my hand and finally said, "I am so relieved." I couldn't help but smile. "I'm sorry, Edith, but I have seen them take advantage of you for so many years. How many more will it be?" There were moments when I wanted to say I had enough, but it was none of my concern. I knew I sighed. You were correct all along. I just refused to admit it. So what happens now? Asked Laureen as she poured us tea. Gary must be panicking by this point. Let him panic, I replied with a shrug. I need time to process my emotions and for them to understand what they have lost. We talked with Laureen throughout the evening. For the first time in ages, I did not feel like a mother or grandmother, but simply a woman speaking with a friend. It was liberating. By the time Laureen left, darkness was settling in. I decided it was time to check my phone. 37 missed calls, 23 messages. I started scrolling through them, frowning at the increasingly desperate and demanding tone. "Mom, what is going on? Why hasn't the mortgage payment gone through?" "Edith, it's Melissa, we need to talk. It's urgent." "Grandma, my card has been blocked. I am stuck downtown without money." The last message from Gary arrived just 10 minutes ago. "Mom, I am coming to see you. We need to talk." My muscles tensed. Was I prepared for this conversation? Yet there seemed to be no other option. I turned off the living room light and walked to the kitchen, setting the kettle on. I took out my best cup, the one reserved only for special occasions. Today was certainly a special day. The day Edith Wilson finally said no. I heard a car pulling up and glanced out the window. Gary was alone, without Melissa. That was unexpected, as she usually controlled every important discussion. The doorbell rang, as if signaling the start of a battle. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and walked to open the door. Gary stood there looking out of place, his usually pristine shirt crumpled, and his eyes showing a mix of frustration and panic. Without a word, I stepped aside to let him in. "Mom, what is happening?" he asked, without any pleasantries. "All the payments have been declined. The bank says you withdrew all your authorizations. We cannot pay the mortgage." I moved to the kitchen where the kettle was already humming. "Would you like some tea?" I asked calmly as I reached for a second cup. "What tea?" Gary exclaimed, shaking his hands in disbelief. "Do you understand what is going on? The bank has called about the missed payment. Melissa is frantic." Pouring hot water into the teapot, I turned to my son. I said, "I know. I have canceled every financial obligation to your family, all 174 payments. I have no plans to resume them." Gary seemed stunned, as if my words were impossible to accept. "What? Why?" He sank back into his chair, eyes fixed on me. "Is this some kind of joke? You were not invited to dinner. My wife does not want you there." I quoted his message, noticing the change in his face. "That message was from you, Gary, not a joke." And my reply was no joke either. His face whitened, and he bowed his head. "This is not what you think," he began, but I cut him off. "What am I supposed to believe? To imagine that my own son forced me out of the home I paid for, and that my daughter-in-law refuses to include me at their table, even though I support their way of life, felt unbearable." I placed a cup of tea in front of him, but he did not even glance at it. "Mom, that was foolish," I admitted. "I should not have written that. Melissa was hurt, and you chose to comfort her by offending your own mother." I finished his sentence. "That is very kind of you, Gary." "Mom, please," he pleaded softly. "We cannot manage this without your assistance. We have mortgages, loans, Toby has college fees to cover." I sipped my tea, the anger simmering within me that I had held back for years rising up. "Did you consider that when you denied me even the most basic respect? When Melissa judged my clothes? When Toby forgot my birthday? When you failed to call me on the anniversary of my father's death?" Gary looked remorseful, yet I noticed a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. He always was a poor actor. "Mom, we value everything you do for us. Truly we do. It is just that sometimes," he hesitated, searching for words, "there are misunderstandings. We all love you, even Melissa, though she may not always express it." I stared at my son, a man grown and father of two, yet at that moment he resembled a child caught stealing cookies. "Gary, I do not believe you," I said softly. "I do not believe you love me. You love my money, my assistance, my eagerness to fix your problems, but you do not love me." "That is not true," he exclaimed, standing abruptly. "How can you say that?" "Because it is," I answered. Indeed, I stayed seated, maintaining my calm. "When was the last time you asked me how I was feeling?" I asked. "When did you ever check on my life, or invite me over for no reason? Not when you needed money or help with the kids." Gary opened his mouth, but found no words to respond. I went on. "Your father always said you cannot buy love." I did not listen. I believed if I was generous enough, helpful enough, you would value me. "I was mistaken, Mom." Gary stepped closer. "I understand you are upset. Why not let Melissa and me come this weekend? We can discuss everything calmly." "No," I shook my head firmly. "I do not need to. My decision is final." "But how will we afford the house, the cars, Toby's tuition?" I heard panic in his voice. "You have a good job, Gary, and so does Melissa. You are adults. You can manage it." He clenched his fists, his irritation turning swiftly into anger. "You cannot do this to us." His voice escalated. After everything you—" I stood up firmly. "What have you done for me, Gary?" I challenged. "Name one thing you have done selflessly, expecting nothing in return." Silence fell again. I saw him desperately searching the past few years for any example, but none came. His silence spoke louder than words. "You see," I sighed, "you cannot even find one instance. It is not fair." He stepped back quickly. "You are embarrassing me." I smiled ironically. "What kind of embarrassment is it, turning down a house and a family dinner?" Gary ran his fingers through his hair, a gesture I recalled from his teenage years when he felt anxious. "It was a mistake. Mom, I have already apologized. What more do you expect from me? Should I get down on my knees?" I said firmly. "I want you to leave. I need time to sort things out, and when I am ready to talk, I will let you know. But for now, please go away." Gary looked at me for a moment, as if he could not believe I was actually asking him to leave. Then, without a word, he turned silently and left the kitchen. I heard the front door slam and the sound of his car engine as he drove off. Only when everything became quiet did I allow myself to sit up and breathe out deeply. My hands trembled. Facing my son was more difficult than I had imagined. A part of me, the old, familiar part, wanted to chase after him and offer everything back just to calm his anger. But I did not. Instead, I finished drinking the cold tea and began washing the dishes, needing to keep my hands busy to steady my thoughts. The phone rang. I saw Melissa's name, but rejected the call. A minute later, a message popped up. Edith wrote, "We need to talk. Gary told me about your conversation. I believe there has been a serious misunderstanding. Let us resolve this like adults." I smiled. Melissa always loved that phrase, especially when she wanted to feel superior. I did not reply. The following morning started with a visit from Francis Whitaker, my lawyer. He came with documents to sign a new will and trust. In fact, it was already Edith who arranged the papers on the table, just as we had planned. The majority of the estate is placed into an irrevocable trust, with you appointed as the sole beneficiary for your lifetime. After your passing, the assets will be distributed according to your wishes, 40% to Rebecca, 10% to a charity supporting libraries, and the remainder at your discretion. I carefully reviewed the documents. Gary and Toby received the minimum portions mandated by law, while Melissa was left with nothing. That was correct. I nodded and signed each page. Francis observed me with a faint smile and said, "You know, Edith, in my 30 years of experience, I have seldom witnessed such significant alterations in wills. Typically, people are hesitant." I responded, "I have hesitated enough already. For years, I signed the final document." He nodded, collected the papers, and said he would file them today. "I will send you copies within the week. And Edith," he paused, "if you require legal assistance regarding any potential family disputes, I am always available." After Francis departed, I decided to take a walk. The day was clear, and the fresh air helped refresh my thoughts. I made my way to the park, where James and I frequently spent weekends. Sitting on a bench, I watched children playing with their parents. A young woman with a little boy caught my attention. She was patiently helping him build a sandcastle, laughing together as it crumbled. I remembered doing the same with Gary years ago. Where and when had those moments gone? I had lost that simple happiness of just being together. My thoughts were suddenly interrupted by the phone ringing. It was Toby's number. I hesitated but chose to pick up. "Grandma," his voice was tense. "Is it true you canceled all the payments?" I tried to keep my tone calm. "Yes, it is true, but why?" He sounded genuinely confused. "What happened?" "Your father did not explain. He mentioned some kind of misunderstanding, about you being upset by a message." Toby quickly added, "Grandma, my credit cards have been blocked. I cannot pay the rent," he said plainly. I sighed. Toby was always direct, getting straight to the core of the issue, and how it personally impacted him. "Toby, you are 23 years old. You have a job at an insurance company. Why are you still relying on my money?" I asked. "Yeah," he hesitated. "You have always been there for me. I am used to it." "Exactly," I interrupted. "You are all used to it. You took my help for granted and never paused to consider how I felt when your father wrote to tell me I was not welcome in the house I was paying for." There was silence on the other side of the line. "Did Dad really write that?" Toby finally asked, disbelief creeping into his voice. "Yes, I did not soften the blow," I said firmly. "That was the last straw. For years I supported your family, paid for your home, your cars, your education, even your tennis club. And what did I receive in return? Disrespect, neglect, and visits only on holidays. Grandma, he stammered again, unable to find words. "I never realized you felt that way, since none of you ever asked," I said without any anger, just stating a fact. "You kept taking and taking without ever considering how I felt." Silence followed once more. Then a soft question came. "So what now?" "Now you have to handle it by yourself," I replied calmly, "as all grown-ups do." "But Grandma, I need to go." Toby, ordinary, yet quite international name, interrupted him. "Think about what I said, and how all of you have treated me over the years." I ended the call and sat quietly for a while, watching the park and talking to Toby, ordinary, yet quite international name. A strange feeling lingered. part sadness and part relief. Sadness for realizing how shallow our relationship had been, and relief for finally speaking the truth. I spent the evening reading a book I had been postponing, and before going to sleep, I checked my phone again. There were several missed calls from Gary and Melissa, and a message from Rebecca, multi-level name, common in English-speaking countries, saying, "Grandma, our house is in turmoil. My parents are fighting. Toby, ordinary yet quite international name, is panicking about money. Are you okay? Can I come over tomorrow?" I replied, "Yes, dear. I would love to see you. I am perfectly fine." The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Melissa was standing on the doorstep, impeccably dressed and styled perfectly, wearing an unusual smile. In her hands, she carried a box of pastries from a fancy bakery. "Edith, stylized, do not replace. Good morning," she said, handing me the box. "May I come in? We need to talk." I let her enter silently, wondering what tactic she'd decided on this time. Melissa stepped into the living room, casting the familiar assessing glance that always made my hands go cold. "Edith, stylized, do not replace," she said, sitting on the edge of the couch. Sitting on the couch, with her hands folded in her lap, I thought there must have been a serious misunderstanding. I calmly settled across from her without offering any tea or coffee. "Gary should never have sent that message." She shook her head, a look of sincere remorse on her face. "It was an impulsive reaction," she said. "We were all under stress with work and dinner plans." "Melissa," I interrupted sharply, "let's not waste time here. You did not come to say sorry. You came because of the money." Her smile flickered briefly, but returned almost instantly. "Edith, this is not fair," she began. "I'm genuinely sorry for what took place. We all value your help and support very much. You are a key part of our family. So much so that you did not want me sitting at your table," I asked quietly, without any anger. Melissa sighed, as if trying to explain something to a child who could not grasp the situation. That evening was meaningful. We had important guests who were potential clients. I wanted everything to be flawless. "You understand how crucial this is to my career, and I could have ruined it." I raised one eyebrow, asking with what exactly? With my old-fashioned clothes or my inappropriate comments? "That is not what I meant," she replied, pursing her lips. "Edith, we both know our relationship has always been complicated, but that does not justify destroying the entire family. Gary is desperate. Toby cannot pay his bills. We risk losing the house. The house I bought," I reminded her. "Which you contributed to as well," she corrected. "We invested a lot of money too." I looked at this woman. Melissa was striking and self-assured, always accustomed to getting her way. She had been part of my family for 25 years, yet a genuine bond between us had never formed. I leaned in and told her, "I will no longer fund your lifestyle, not the house, not the cars, nor Toby's education. This is my final verdict." The friendly facade she wore vanished instantly, showing the cold calculation I had long suspected beneath her smiles. "You cannot do this to us," she said with a hardened voice. "After everything we have done for you." I asked her with real interest, "What exactly have you done for me, Melissa?" She faltered, clearly caught off guard by the question. "We included you in our family, let you be part of your grandchildren's lives, cared for you." "Care for you." I bit back a bitter laugh, thinking, when was the last time you called, just to ask how I was feeling, and not to demand money? Melissa stood up, her face drained of color with anger. "You will regret this, Edith. We are your only family. Who else will look after you when you grow too old to live alone?" I rose too, as I always had before I devoted all my energy and money to your family. Melissa moved toward the door, but paused at the threshold. "This is not over, Edith. Gary won't let this go. You're his mother, and he has rights." "Rights to what?" I shook my head. "Go away and do not return until you learn some basic respect." After Melissa departed, I felt an unusual emptiness, as if the final act of a lengthy play had concluded. The curtain dropped and the performers had scattered. I moved to the window where the day was bright and clear. Sunshine filled the air, and life carried on. Neighbors tended their gardens, children pedaled bicycles, the mail carrier delivered letters. My eyes landed on the kitchen table, where an untouched pile of overdue bills rested. Previously, I would have rushed to handle them, fearing I might miss deadlines and disappoint my family. Now I could settle them whenever I wished. I could visit the store and purchase a new dress without worrying whether there was enough money left to cover Toby's tennis club fees. I could even enroll in that art class I had been dreaming about for ages. For the first time in many years, I felt truly free, liberated from duties, free from guilt, free from the endless need to sacrifice my own wants for others. I grabbed my phone and dialed Lorene's number. "Remember when you said you might go to the mountains next month?" I asked. When she answered, I told her, "I want to join, if that invitation is still open, Edith." I could sense happiness in her voice. "Of course we'd love to have you, but I thought you could not make it because of—" "I can now," I smiled. No longer was I bound by any commitments holding me back. After speaking with Lorene, I took out an old notebook and began crafting a list of dreams, trips, and things I had postponed endlessly because something else always took priority. The priorities were Gary's needs, Melissa's desires, and Toby's unpredictable wishes. But now it was my moment, Edith Wilson's moment, and I was determined to seize it fully. The phone rang once more, but I declined Gary's call firmly, knowing there were far more important matters demanding my attention. These past 2 weeks had been unexpectedly calm. I had anticipated that Gary and Melissa would attempt to sway me, yet following my sister-in-law's visit, an unusual quiet settled over them. They never reached out again or dropped by without notice. Only Rebecca came around occasionally, but we had a silent understanding not to delve into family controversies. Tuesday morning greeted me with radiant sunlight, and I leisurely enjoyed coffee on the veranda while flipping through a travel catalog. A trip to the mountains with Lorene was already planned for next month, but why not consider something new? I had only ever experienced Europe through pictures and films. James had always dreamed of introducing me to Italy, the land of his ancestors. We had been postponing that journey until retirement, but as his health declined, traveling was no longer an option. I browsed through images of Rome, Florence, and Venice, picturing myself wandering with a camera, comfortably shod and unhurried, free from rushing home to tend to grandchildren or fix Gary's latest financial dilemma. Suddenly, the doorbell disrupted my daydream. Lauren appeared on the doorstep, holding a large wicker basket. "Good morning, traveler," she smiled as she stepped inside. "I brought croissants from the new French bakery and some fresh gossip." I laughed. As I guided her into the house, what could be a better way to spend a Tuesday afternoon? We settled on the veranda. Lorene poured the coffee she had brought in a thermos and took out the croissants, which were still warm. She took a bite of the pastry and asked, "How is your new life of freedom treating you?" I admitted feeling unaccustomed. Sometimes I wake up sensing I've forgotten something important. Then I remember the only person I must care for is myself. Lorene nodded with understanding. "That's normal. You've been living according to someone else's needs for so long. Your body isn't used to the calm yet." She was silent for a moment, then spoke in a more serious tone. "I saw Melissa at the supermarket yesterday. She was buying canned food and pasta, none of the usual treats she used to enjoy." I raised an eyebrow. "Really? What did she look like?" "Not as flawless as usual," Lorene replied. "Her hair was a little messy, her clothes simpler. She did not notice me, and I didn't greet her." I tried to picture Melissa without her typical shine, which was quite difficult. My sister-in-law always seemed like she had just stepped off the cover of a fashion magazine. It feels odd to imagine that Gary could be facing money troubles. He has never been skilled at saving. It is about time he learned to manage his finances. Edith firmly cut him off. At his age, he should be able to stand independently instead of depending on his mother. I could not suppress a grin at my friend's straightforwardness. Edith always expressed her thoughts honestly, without softening the impact, which is probably why our friendship had lasted for so many years. She was like a refreshing breeze amid all the pretenses around us. Speaking of fresh beginnings, Edith gestured towards the catalog on the table and asked what I was looking at. I told her I was contemplating a trip to Italy. Sliding the catalog toward her, I added that James had long wished to show me Rome. Edith's face lit up. She thought it was a wonderful plan. When did I intend to go? I shrugged and said maybe in the autumn since I still needed time to organize. Edith suggested why wait longer, as June was an ideal month to visit Italy. The weather would not be too hot, but pleasant enough for walking. I pondered what had been holding me back. In the past, there had always been reasons to delay: helping with the children, being ready in case of another Gary emergency, or avoiding spending on myself when the family might have needed support. But now, those excuses no longer applied. No, you are right, I smiled, and decided I would call the travel agency today. Edith nodded in approval, pleased. She then added, that is the right choice, and if you want some company, I would be happy to go with you. Italy had been on my bucket list for quite some time. We spent the remainder of the morning exploring various travel routes and attractions we'd want to visit after such a long pause. I was genuinely thrilled, looking forward to something fresh and thrilling. When Lorene left, I immediately contacted the travel agency and scheduled a meeting for the following day. Then, I retrieved an old atlas James had gifted me years ago and began examining a map of Italy, picturing myself in those exotic landscapes. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, breaking my daydream. I opened the door and saw Toby, looking disheveled in a wrinkled shirt with dark shadows under his eyes. "Grandma," he mumbled, shifting uneasily from one foot to the other. "May I come in?" I quietly stepped aside, allowing him to enter. Toby moved to the living room and sat down on the sofa, nervously rubbing his hands. "Would you like some tea?" I offered. "No thanks," he declined, shaking his head. "Grandma, I really needed your help." I sat down opposite him, maintaining a composed expression. "What kind of help, Toby?" He inhaled deeply, as if preparing to plunge into icy water. "Money, Grandma. I need money. My card has been blocked, the bank is demanding payment, and I cannot pay my rent or my car." His voice trembled. "I am completely stuck. Pardon the language." I looked at my grandson who was now a grown man, but appeared like a lost child. Toby had always been spoiled, first by Gary and Melissa, then by me. He had never truly needed to struggle for anything. I asked calmly, "How much do you owe the bank?" He lowered his gaze and replied, "7,000. Gary had gotten slightly carried away with credit cards over the past few months. I asked him, "What did you spend that money on?" He shrugged without meeting my eyes and replied it was on various things, like a new phone, a trip to the coast with friends, and a few parties. I remained silent, waiting for him to say more. Finally, Toby looked up and said, "Grandma, I know I have not been very attentive to you. I have not called or visited much, but I truly love you, and I am seriously asking for your help now. I promise I will pay you back." I studied him carefully, trying to detect the honesty behind those words. Toby always had a talent for charm when he needed something, a trait he had inherited from Melissa. I spoke at last. "You are 23 years old. You have been working for an insurance company for almost 2 years. Why have you not learned to manage your finances yet?" He looked embarrassed and said, "I do not know. I never really thought about it. I could always ask my parents or you." I nodded. "Exactly. There was always someone solving your problems. But Toby, you can't keep going on like this. Sooner or later, everyone must learn to stand on their own 2 feet." He nodded eagerly. "I know, Grandma, and I will learn. I promise. Just help me this one last time. I will get an extra job and save money." I shook my head. "No, Toby, I am not giving you any money." His face stretched in surprise. He clearly had not expected me to refuse. "But Grandma, what am I supposed to do?" What do adults do when they find themselves in tough situations?" I replied, "They seek a solution, discuss debt restructuring with the bank, find extra sources of income, and reduce their expenses. Toby, обычно, no достаточно международное имя можно оставить, looked at me like I spoke a foreign tongue, saying, but, it is so complicated. Life is complicated. I merely shrugged, especially when responsibility for your decisions must be taken. He suddenly stood up, his face showing a storm of feelings, doubt, bitterness, fury. So after all these years of saying you love me, you are just leaving me? I love you, Toby, I answered calmly. That is why I cannot keep enabling your addiction to my money. That is not love, but codependency, and it harms you more than it helps. Almost yelling, he retorted, you are just getting even with all of us because of some fight with Dad. Looking at my furious grandson, I saw in him a mirror of Melissa, the same wild reaction to rejection, and the same refusal to accept denial. Toby, please sit down, I said quietly, yet firmly. To my surprise, he obeyed, collapsing back onto the sofa. I am not seeking revenge on anyone. I just stopped being an ATM for my family, stopped buying a love and respect that should be unconditional. I paused to let him reflect. Think about it. When was the last time you came to me just for fun, without asking for money or support? When did you take an interest in my life or feelings? Toby remained silent, avoiding my eyes. He could not remember. I sighed and said, you see, Toby, that's the issue. Our relationship has long turned into a mere transaction. I provide money, and you only pretend to care about me. This is not a family. It feels more like a business deal. That is not true, he replied, shaking his head, but the certainty in his voice was missing. We do care about you, we really do. I raised one eyebrow and challenged him. Then tell me one thing you have done for me, selflessly, in the past year. Toby hesitated, his forehead creased with tension, as he struggled to recall anything. A call, a visit, or a gift that wasn't tied to a request or some kind of duty. At last he muttered, I came to your birthday party. Yes, I confirmed. You did, but only for an hour. And after everyone else slept, you didn't bring a present and slipped away right after the cake, saying you had plans to meet some friends. He lowered his gaze and whispered, I didn't mean to. I just wasn't thinking. That's exactly it, Toby. Neither of you were thinking about how I felt. My voice softened. I am not angry with you. Really, I am not. But I will no longer take part in this unhealthy relationship. We remained quiet for a while. Toby looked downcast and slumped on the couch. In that moment, he appeared to me like the stubborn yet vulnerable little boy I had once taught to ride his bike. I leaned close and said, look, I'm not going to give you money anymore, but I can offer you something else. He looked up, curious. My friend Francis Whitaker, a lawyer, needs a part-time assistant. It's nothing difficult, just sorting documents and answering calls. It won't fix all your problems, but it can bring in some extra income. If you want, I can speak with him. Toby's surprise was plain to see as he digested the offer. Would you do that for me? After everything I have said, you are my grandson Toby. Обычно, no достаточно международное имя можно оставить. And I love you unconditionally, but my affection will no longer be shown through checks and credit cards. He fell silent for a moment, reflecting on my words. Then he slowly nodded. All right, I will give it a try. Thank you, Grandma. When Toby left, I felt a strange blend of sadness and relief. Perhaps this talk marked the beginning of a new, healthier bond with my grandson. Or maybe it was just another move on his part. Only time would reveal the truth. That very evening, Rebecca, многоэтажное имя, часто используется в англоязычных странах, оставить, came over. Unlike her brother, she appeared composed and serene. I met Toby on my way here, she said as she helped me prepare dinner. He was rather quiet, and we discussed money and responsibility. I was chopping vegetables for the salad, uncertain if he received it well. Rebecca nodded, stirring the dressing. It is important for him to mature a little. Toby has always found things too easy. I glanced at my granddaughter. They were both about the same age, but so different. Rebecca had always been more independent and mature. How are things at home? I asked carefully. Rebecca sighed. Honestly, not well. My parents argue constantly. Mom blames Dad for failing to persuade you to resume the support. Dad says she ruined everything with her arrogance. I am sorry you had to be caught in the middle of this. I placed my hand on her shoulder. It is all right, she said with a faint smile. I have known for a long time that the relationship was far from healthy. They stayed together mainly for prestige and comfort. When both of these were at risk, she left her sentence unfinished, but I understood. Gary and Melissa's marriage had always seemed peculiar to me, my gentle, compliant son, and his driven, controlling wife. Now that the financial safety net is gone, every flaw in their bond is clear. They are selling Mom's car, Rebecca said as she continued arranging the table. The SUV you funded for her last year. They are also trying to refinance the mortgage. I nodded without replying. Part of me felt a twinge of guilt because I did not want my son to face hardship, yet another part knew this was a needed lesson. You know, Grandma, Rebecca sat down at the table. I want you to understand that I support your choice. I stared at her, surprised. You do? She nodded. I've watched them take advantage of you for a long time, especially your mother. I tried speaking with Dad, but he always found excuses. I joined her, unexpectedly moved by her words. Thank you, Rebecca. It means so much to me. I only want you to be happy. She held my hand gently. You have cared for all of us for years. Now it is time you think about yourself. We ate our meal, chatting about her job, my plans to visit Italy, and the books we had recently enjoyed. Just ordinary conversation between two people, genuinely interested in each other. No questions asked, no manipulation, no tension at all. This is exactly how I believe a family bond should feel. When Rebecca, multifaceted name, often used in English-speaking countries, keep, was about to leave, she embraced me more tightly than usual. You know, I will always be there for you, right? No matter what happens between you and your parents, I understand, sweetheart. I gently caressed her cheek and said I will always stand by you, not because it is an obligation, but because I truly want to. After Rebecca, multifaceted name, often used in English-speaking countries, keep, left, I sat quietly for a long time, reflecting on the unpredictable nature of family life. How curious it is that among all of my relatives, it was my granddaughter who showed the greatest understanding and maturity. Perhaps that is the essence of inheritance, not just passing down genes and possessions, but also values, principles, and the capacity to genuinely love and support each other. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Gary's number coming up on the screen. I hesitated but chose to pick up. Yes, Gary? Mom? His voice sounded strained. We need to discuss something as a family tomorrow. About what exactly? I asked calmly, trying to understand the situation and how we might resolve it. I sighed. Gary, I have already told you and Melissa my decision is final. Mom, please, he said pleadingly, just listen to us. We are willing to find a compromise. I hesitated. Part of me resisted continuing this seemingly endless cycle of conversation, but the wiser, calmer part of me knew that totally cutting ties with my son would not bring me peace. Fine, Gary, 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon at my place. Thank you, Mom. The relief in his voice was almost tangible. We will all be there. I ended the call and went to the window, my mind still swirling. The evening sky was painted with hues of pink and gold as I pondered tomorrow's gathering. Another session of family discussions, but this time it would be unlike before since I had new guidelines to follow. I rose early, even when the family meeting was planned for 2 in the afternoon. Despite appearing calm on the outside, I sensed a strong tension within me. Something hinted that today's talk would differ from Gary and Melissa's earlier efforts to sway my choices. To clear my mind, I chose to tend the garden. Engaging with the soil always soothed me. There was something serene about watching your hard work turn into blossoms and fruit. By midday, I had finished weeding and watering, then took a shower and prepared a light meal. Glancing at the clock, I noticed I still had ample time to organize my thoughts before my relatives arrived. Promptly at 2, the doorbell sounded. I inhaled deeply and opened it. Gary appeared alone, without Melissa or the children. "Mom," he acknowledged, stepping inside. "The others will join us shortly. I wanted to talk with you privately first." Silently, I guided him into the living room. Gary seemed uneasy. His usually tidy shirt was wrinkled, with shadows beneath his eyes. "Mom," he said as he took a seat across from me, "I want you to understand that whatever unfolds tonight is not my plan." Melissa insisted. I raised an eyebrow and asked, "What is going to happen, Gary?" He lowered his gaze and replied, "She feels that we need." I needed to act decisively to help you understand how your choice impacts the entire family. I could feel the tension rising inside me. What kind of move would Gary make? He opened his mouth to respond, but then the sound of many cars arriving interrupted him. I went to the window and saw 3 vehicles pulling up to the driveway of my home. Melissa stepped out of the first one, impeccably dressed and groomed, with a look of resolve on her face. Behind her were Toby and Rebecca. The other cars were filled with people I vaguely recognized, perhaps Melissa's parents, her sister and brother-in-law, and some family friends. I turned to my son and asked, "What is all this about?" He seemed puzzled. Melissa had decided that a family meeting would be more effective with all the involved parties present. Stakeholders. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. "Your wife brought a crowd of outsiders into our home to discuss our family issues," I said. Before Gary could reply, the doorbell rang sharply. I went slowly to open it, feeling my anger rise, yet keeping a cold, focused determination. Melissa stood on the doorstep, wearing a peculiar smile. Edith spoke clearly and loudly, addressing the group behind her. "Good afternoon. We are all here to talk about the situation concerning our family." I glanced around at the assembled group. At least 10 people, each wearing a mix of awkwardness and curiosity. "Melissa," I said quietly but firmly, "I did not invite all these people into my home, but this is—" Edith waved her hands in exaggerated shock, saying, "Isn't a family supposed to stand by each other in difficult moments?" I noticed Rebecca, mnogoetażne imię, часто используется в англоязычных странах, оставить, standing at a distance, clearly feeling embarrassed. Toby, обычное, но достаточно международное имя, можно оставить, however, stayed close to his mother, copying her confident stance. "I am with my parents," Melissa pointed out, indicating an elderly couple, my brother Curtis and his wife, my sister Paige and her husband. They all seemed deeply worried about what was unfolding. "We are one big family, aren't we?" she asked. I met her gaze firmly. "No, Melissa, we are not. This is my home and I decide who enters it. For now, I am only welcoming you, Gary, and the children. Everyone else must leave." Melissa took a step closer, her smile faltering. Edith, Stilizovania, Nizaminyat, said calmly, "Don't be so unwelcoming. People have traveled far on your invitation, not mine." I remained resolute. Either they leave, or there will be no discussion at all. A tense silence followed, as I saw Melissa urgently weighing her options. Eventually, she turned to her relatives and said, "I think it is best if we continue this family talk in private. Please wait in the cars, or take a walk around Wilson. We'll be finished soon." Melissa's relatives shifted uneasily, exchanging nervous looks. Finally, her father, a tall man with a military presence, nodded. "Of course, dear. We will be nearby," I observed quietly as they parted ways, then stepped aside to allow Melissa, Toby, обычное, но достаточно международное имя, можно оставить, and Rebecca, многоэтажное имя, часто используется в англоязычных странах, оставить, into the house. When the door shut behind them, I turned back to the family and said, "So, The voice remained steady, despite the anger boiling inside me. "Who is going to explain what this whole mess is about?" Melissa was the first to break the silence. "Edith, your choice to pull your financial support impacts not only Gary and me, but our entire extended family. My parents depended on us to help cover their nursing home expenses. Gary's brother needs assistance because he lost his job." "Gary's brother?" I interrupted. turning to my son. You mean Neil, the one I have not seen in 5 years, because you forgot to invite him to family events? Gary looked puzzled, but Melissa went on. The bottom line, Edith, is that your self-centered decision has triggered a chain reaction. Everyone suffers, including your grandchildren. Toby, обычное, но достаточно международное имя можно оставить, nodded, taking over the conversation. Grandma, I cannot afford my rent. I face the eviction at the end of the month. You could temporarily move back in with your parents, I suggested. That is the issue, Melissa exclaimed. We are barely managing on our own. The bank threatens to foreclose on the house if we do not make the payments by the end of the week. I glanced at Rebecca. Многоэтажное имя, часто используется в англоязычных странах. Оставить, who was quietly standing by. What about you, Rebecca? Are you here to ask for money as well? She shook her head. No, Grandma. I came because I did not want them to represent me. I respect your decision. Melissa gave her daughter an irritated look, but kept going. Turning to me, Edith, we are willing to find a middle ground. We understand we have hurt you. Gary should not have sent. That message was a blunder that has cost us all dearly. This is not just about the message itself, Melissa. I shook my head slowly. The message was merely the breaking point. It reflects years of neglect, disregard, and exploitation. Melissa threw up her hands in an exaggerated manner. We are a family, she declared. Families support one another. It is amusing that you only mention family values when money is involved. I replied quietly. Where was this so-called family unity when I spent holidays alone? When I was ill and none of you bothered to bring me medicine? When it was the anniversary of James's passing, not a single one of you reached out. Only silence followed. Gary lowered his gaze, and Toby shifted uncomfortably on his feet. Only Melissa stayed indifferent. We all have busy lives, Edith. We have jobs, responsibilities. She started to explain. I have work and obligations too. I cut her off sharply. Yet, I always manage to find time and money for my family, prioritizing your needs before my own. And how did you all repay me for that? I looked from one to the other. Gary, when was the last time you asked how I was truly feeling? Not out of politeness, but because you honestly cared. My son remained silent, avoiding eye contact. Toby, how many times have you sought me out for nothing, except when you required money? My grandson anxiously licked his lips, but did not respond. Melissa, I turned to my daughter-in-law. Name one thing you have done for me throughout the years. A single act of kindness or respect. She opened her mouth, but could not find a word. You see, I sighed, you cannot even recall a single example to show. The relationship between us was never a normal human connection, because there simply were none, only exchanges. I gave, you took, and Melissa was the first to come to her senses. Edith said this was manipulation, an attempt to make us feel guilty and distract us from the heart of the issue. I asked Melissa with sincere curiosity, what exactly is the core problem? She almost shouted back, you are tearing our family apart with your selfishness. We could lose the house. Toby, обычное, но достаточно международное имя можно оставить, might lose his apartment. My parents will be forced to move into a government-run nursing facility, and I have to support all of you. I shook my head. Gary is 54 years old. Toby is 23, and you are a thriving real estate agent. Why are you still dependent on my money? Gary finally looked up and said, because you have always been the one to help us. Exactly, I nodded. You used to believe it was your entitlement, not my decision. When I chose to break this unhealthy pattern, you did not consider why I did it, but immediately demanded that everything return to how it was. I walked to the window. Cars were still parked outside, with Melissa's relatives around. It was so typical of her to make a public scene, trying to embarrass me and induce guilt. You know what the most heartbreaking part is, I told them. You still fail to grasp the real problem. You think I am merely upset by the message, and that this is a whim that can be fixed with the right words, or a display of family togetherness. I paused and added, but that is not the point. The essence is that I finally understood the reality of our relationship, realizing I was never a mother, grandmother, or mother-in-law to you. I was merely an atmia, a source of money. And the moment that source stopped flowing, you suddenly remembered family values. Melissa advanced toward me, her face twisted with fury. "You ungrateful, selfish old woman," she spat, "after everything we have done for you." "What exactly have you done for me, Melissa?" I replied calmly. "Explain it to everyone here." She remained silent, her lips pressed tightly together. "Nothing," I responded for her. "You have done nothing for me. You only tolerated my presence when you needed to access my money. You criticized my clothes, my home, my habits. You turned Gary and Toby against me. And now you act surprised. I refuse to be part of this any longer." I turned to Gary. "Son, I have loved you from the very first day of your life, and will love you until my last. However, I will no longer be involved in this toxic relationship. I will not fund your life, nor will I ignore disrespect." Gary looked confused. "Mom, what do you expect us to do? Should we kneel and beg for forgiveness?" "No, Gary," I said, "I want you to mature, take responsibility for your own lives, and learn to respect not just me, but yourselves as well." Melissa snorted. "That was a lovely speech, Edith. Truly touching. Now let's face reality. Money is what we need right now." I looked at this woman, beautiful, confident, accustomed to getting her way, and all I felt was exhaustion. "No, Melissa, not now, not this time. Later is never the right time. You cannot do this to us," she shouted. "We are your family. Family is more than just sharing a last name." I shook my head. "It means care, respect, attention. Everything I have missed from you for many years." I turned to Toby and Rebecca. "Kids, I love you both. My door will always be open, but not for borrowing money for genuine communication. If that is what you want." Rebecca nodded, tears shimmering in her eyes. Toby looked down, avoiding my eyes. I then straightened and said, "I am asking you all to leave. This conversation is finished." Melissa stared at me in shock. "You are throwing us out," I said firmly. "Yes, please leave and take all those people you brought with you." Melissa grabbed her purse and walked toward the door. "You will regret this, Edith, when you are all alone. You will remember today." Gary hesitated, glancing between his wife and me. "Mom." "Gary, go," I urged him gently toward the exit. "Think about what I said, and when you are ready to have a true talk, not about money, but about us, I will be here." He nodded and slowly walked to the door. Toby followed silently. Only Rebecca stayed behind to hug me. "I will call you tomorrow." "Grandma," she whispered, "I will be waiting." "Dear," I caressed her cheek. When the door closed behind the last of them, I sank into the chair, feeling a strange mix of sorrow and relief. Voices full of excitement came from the courtyard. Melissa was likely sharing her version of the events with the gathered relatives. I was indifferent since I had already spoken my mind. Then the phone rang. It was Lorene. "Edith, I just drove past your house and noticed quite a crowd at the gate. What is happening?" "It's a long story," I sighed. "Melissa had called a family meeting." "Oh my goodness," Lauren said thoughtfully. "How did it go?" "As well as one could expect, with plenty of drama and little understanding." "Are you all right? Do you need me to come over?" Before, I might have declined, not wanting to burden my friend with my troubles. But now I said, "Yes, Lorene, you should come. I think I could really use a caring shoulder." She responded immediately, "I will be there in 20 minutes, and I'll bring that wine we enjoyed last time." I smiled as I ended the call. Something inside me told me that, painful as today was, it was a crucial step toward a fresh beginning, a life where I would put myself first. Half a year later, the Tuscan sun gently warmed my face while I sat on the terrace of a small bistro, savoring a wonderful local wine. Beside me, Lorene was eagerly jotting notes in her travel diary. "I can't believe we are actually here," I said, admiring the scenic hills draped in vineyards. "James would be thrilled. He would be proud of you, Lauren," toasted the new Edith. I smiled and clicked my glass with my friends. Much had shifted in those 6 months Following that family meeting, Gary and Melissa had made several more efforts to sway me, even threatening legal action, which the tension quickly eased after I spoke with a lawyer regarding Gary's unexpected visit, bearing a bouquet of flowers along with an apology. However, this was soon followed once again by a demand for money. I remained firm in my refusal. Over time, their attempts became increasingly rare until they stopped completely. From Rebecca, I discovered they had to sell their house and relocate to a smaller apartment. Melissa had taken on an additional job, and Gary was finally beginning to take responsibility in handling the family finances. Toby, to my surprise, accepted a position with Francis Whitaker and appeared to have found his path in the legal profession. We met a few times. The encounters were awkward at first, but gradually grew more genuine, without any requests for money or bitterness. Rebecca stayed the only family member with whom I maintained regular contact. She called every week, visited often, and shared her updates and future plans. She was the one who insisted I should not delay the journey to Italy I had dreamed of for so long. "What are you thinking about?" Laureen interrupted my musings. "About how much my life has transformed in the last 6 months," I replied, taking another sip of wine. "Who would have imagined that at 77 I would be starting anew?" Laureen chuckled. "You have always been stronger than you realized, Edith. You just finally allowed that strength to emerge." I nodded, gazing at the sunset that painted the hills in golden shades. Laureen was right. All my life I had given my power away to others, husbands, sons, but now it was time for me to reclaim it. It was only now, in my later years, that I finally summoned the bravery to embrace it for myself. My phone buzzed with a message from Rebecca. "Mnoga etajne ima, chasto используется в англоязычных странах, оставит," showing a picture of her new apartment. "Grandma, I cannot wait for you to return and see everything with your own eyes. I hope Italy is stunning." I smiled as I sent back a photo capturing the beauty of the Tuscan countryside. This connection with my granddaughter was invaluable, the sole family bond I maintained, because it was rooted in genuine affection rather than financial ties. That evening, back at our warm and inviting hotel, I relaxed on the balcony with a book. In the adjacent room, Lauren was speaking on the phone with her daughter. I caught the sound of her laughter through the open window and reflected on how deeply I had feared solitude all my life, how she held on to unhealthy family ties simply to avoid loneliness, and how, ironically, my choice to release those bonds had brought me true freedom and happiness. Although there were fewer people in my life now, those who stayed, Rebecca, mnoga tajnia ima, chasto используется в англоязычных странах, оставит, Lauren, and the other friends I had reconnected with, were there for authentic reasons, born from love, respect, and sincere interest in one another. I recalled Melissa's final words, "You will regret it when you are completely alone." Yet I was not alone. For the first time in many years, I was truly with myself, not lost in the demands of others. Tomorrow, Lauren and I plan to visit a nearby winery and then explore a small museum in a neighboring town. No strict schedule, just simple enjoyment. No fixed plans, just moments that brought us joy. This is what my life has turned into since that pivotal decision. Half a year ago, I embraced a lifestyle where I finally let myself take center stage instead of remaining a constant bystander. I breathed in the warm, evening breeze filled with the scent of Tuscany. James would have been proud. He often said I deserved more than I gave myself. And although it took many years and a tough realization, I eventually understood he was right. At 77, I had finally grasped the most crucial lesson: to love myself as deeply as I loved others. That was the most significant revelation I ever had. The phone buzzed again, Gary's name appearing on the screen. In the past, I would have answered right away, ready to stop everything for his call. But now I simply set the phone aside. Whatever my son wanted to say could wait. It was my moment. I lifted my gaze toward the star-covered Italian sky and smiled. All the 174 receipts, all the years of sacrifices and compromises belonged to the past. Only freedom awaited me. Freedom to be myself without worrying about others' expectations or demands. It was the most wonderful freedom I had ever known.